Stephen, thank you for that kind introduction. I should have invited my wife. She could have heard that. We all right? Hit the gym this morning. You know, I have been a congressman now for 5 months. Youngest male congressman in America. The youngest female congresswoman gets a bit more press than me. But I'm here. She's my buddy. But, you know, there's all the reason in the world to get a little arrogant. I was doing a favor for my mother the other day. She's a professor at Borough Manhattan Community College, been a professor there for 30 years. Spoke to her student government, and I was sitting in a bar there after. I had about an hour to kill. And the bartender says to me, "I love politics." She didn't recognize me, which I found highly offensive. She tells me I'm from Staten Island. I said, "Well, what do you think about Max Rose?" She said, "I hate him. I can't stand the guy. I don't like the sound of his voice. I don't like his face. The only person who hates him more than I do is my mother." I said, "Well, I'm Max Rose. It's nice to meet you." And she said, "Oh my God, the makeup artists on MSNBC don't do you justice. She says, we got to take a selfie because all roads now in politics lead to selfies. And so we take a selfie. She takes out her phone. She says, "You see, you're really not photogenic." So, you know, as I left that bar with my ego in tatters, it dawned on me, though. The campaign is over. The campaign's over. I am just as much this woman's representative, just as much her mother's representative who hates me, as I am my most fervent supporter. And it seems like that's what we've lost a little bit today. Turn on any major news station, you see a horse race. You see a coverage that is all too often trivial in nature, all too often ignores the major challenges that we're facing in our city. Staten Island, South Brooklyn, my district, is amongst the epicenters of many of these problems. Take the opioid epidemic. We're losing on an annual basis more people to overdoses than we lost in the entirety of the Vietnam War. Myself, and I know my friend Jimmy Otto is here, have had to have far too many, countless conversations with grieving parents. Fentanyl streaming from overseas, killing kids, first time they've ever experimented with drugs. Move on to infrastructure. Across the country, we see a similar problem with increased concentration of jobs and populations in cities. It causes a massive affordability crisis and a commuting crisis on top of that, a commuting crisis and an affordability crisis that we have been experiencing on Staten Island for many, many years, and now the entire city is experiencing it. I've had my battles with the mayor about this. I know many of you have as well. Maybe we should go to Iowa to talk to him about it. Sorry, it's just I had to do it. But not only is Staten Island's story now New York City's story, but New York City's story is now America's story. The solutions are obvious: gateway, infrastructure investments, subways, buses. It's clear as day to us. But amidst all these problems, a clear narrative has emerged. You hear the 3,500 Democratic presidential candidates right now saying something very, very similar. We got to think big. The days of milquetoast incrementalism have got to be behind us. You hear them all say it. We have to have paradigm-shifting thought. And that's even more true when you move beyond the problems that we face today and you think about the problems that New York City will face in the future. Automation is coming for white-collar jobs. The days when finance had to be close to Wall Street, geographically speaking, those days are behind us. Our tax revenue, ever more reliant on the 1%, is being squeezed by things like SALT, cybersecurity, massive, massive new threats to our national security that we have never seen before, with nation-state actors utilizing non-state proxies to wage war on us both indirectly as well as potentially directly. And lastly, we're now at the top of our growth cycle. 10 years we've been growing. Recession is looming, a recession is coming. It could be tomorrow, it could be 3 years from now, but New York City, New York State, and the country has got to be prepared. But we have a problem if we just say we have to think big. There's a problem that nobody is talking about, and it is the problem that nobody trusts government today. Nobody believes in government. Nobody sees the small successes that will make people think that we could do something big. In this city, we have a problem. It's a problem that not enough people are talking about. It's the problem of people putting ideology before facts, putting their own fundraising before getting the job done. And I may be a Democrat, but this is a problem that both parties are suffering from. The answer cannot be to chase away thousands of new jobs and billions of dollars in tax revenue with fear-mongering and distortions of basic economic facts, a new brand of voodoo economics like what we saw with Amazon. That cannot be the answer with the threats and the issues that we face today. The race to the bottom with corporations, the race to the bottom with market subsidies is a gigantic problem that requires a national solution. But in the meantime, we cannot cut off our nose to spite our face in this city. So long as Washington, D.C. cannot get the job done, and believe you me, I am working each and every day to be a part of a success story down there, but so long as that does not happen, we have to understand that we in this city are in competition. We're in competition for jobs, we're in competition for tax revenue, we're in competition for governmental success stories, we're in competition for our nation's immigrants. And we have to start acting like it in this city. You know, everyone wants to talk about the blue wave recently. And a lot of us are misconstruing what actually happened. So let me break it down for you. It was not as if millions of people across the country suddenly came to believe that the Democratic Party is their savior. That's not what happened. It wasn't as if people suddenly believed as if the Democratic Party is the panacea, the answer to anything. What happened is you saw candidates across the country, myself included, earn the trust of people. Go door to door, thousands of them, and convince them that it does not have to be this way, that we can truly change the political class. Not only locally, but also nationally. And lo and behold, we had upsets across the country. But those were upsets not for the Democratic Party, those were upsets for individual candidates who presented a vision for a better America. And we have got to continue in that vein. I'm doing my best down in D.C. to not only engage in philosophical discussions, but to actually focus on how we can get the job done. We see that with what we just did on the Verrazano Bridge. We're going to pass split tolling. We're going to take thousands of vehicles off the road, not just in Staten Island, but also in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. We did it with federal action and state action and city action. Everyone came together to do it fast because people have been suffering. We're going after China, putting sanctions on pharmaceutical companies that are producing illicit fentanyl and knowingly shipping it here onto our shores to kill our kids. And in the district, on Staten Island, we are getting as granular and as bread and butter as possible, and I am blessed to have a wonderful partner in crime, Jimmy Otto here, who's working with me across the aisle, putting BS, political divisions aside to actually improve people's lives. And we saw that with soccer season, didn't we, Mr. Borough President? For 20 years, the National Park Service, this thing's crazy. For 20 years, the National Park Service messed up soccer season on Miller Field. Miller Field on the East Shore of Staten Island. There's three things you can guarantee in life: death, taxes, and soccer season. But nonetheless, every spring it took the National Park Service by surprise, and they made the community pay for the porta potties. Well, that changed this year. We fixed it. Thousands of families did not have to have that difficult conversation with their kids to say soccer season ain't starting on time. Jimmy and I may be the only two elected officials in the country to do a ribbon cutting for porta potties. We got the seawall started. Eliminated the last piece, the last bureaucratic restriction that was preventing the city and the state and the federal government from actually breaking ground, because for years now, Staten Islanders have been staring across at the seas that decimated their lives, their livelihoods, that of their families, and government couldn't get it done. Now, why am I here, though, in Manhattan, talking to you about porta potties, soccer season, seawalls, tolling, fentanyl? Why aren't we thinking big? Why am I not talking to you about New Deals and Interstate Highway Acts of the 21st centuries and Apollo projects? Well, the reason is that without trust in government, we will not solve a damn thing in this country. Climate change, the homeless crisis, skyrocketing inequality, all things that we have got to get done, and we have got to get done quickly. But if our constituents do not believe what we say, if they look at elected officials and think that they are just trying to rip them off or ignore them or get rich during office or after office, it doesn't matter how good our plans are. It's not about Democrats anymore. It's not about Republicans anymore. It is about trust. That's why for the last decade, people across the country have only been electing or voting for change. They haven't been voting for a party. They've been voting for change. We can no longer make national points of ideological significance on the backs of hardworking New Yorkers. Think about what New York City could be. New York City can be the place where we show the American people that government can work in big, bold, dynamic, as well as small ways. Because when someone's trash is picked up on time, when someone's commute is just that much shorter, when someone has the best, the most well-paid police officers and teachers and nurses in the country, led by the greatest leaders in the country, such as our Commissioner O'Neill, well, then they'll be ready to talk big as well. They'll be ready to sign on. Ronald Reagan said that there's nothing scarier than someone coming from the government saying, "I'm here to help." Bill Clinton went on to say, "The era of big government is over." George Bush certainly spoke in a constantly antagonistic way towards government, and Barack Obama as well avoided any talk of the ways in which government can be there to solve the big problems that the private sector cannot. And amidst all of this, shocker, government stopped working for us, and people lost faith. Well, if we are going to address the bloated budgets and the never-ending wars that seriously threaten our future, those days have got to be over, but we cannot do it if the people don't believe in us. When our soccer fields open on time, when our communities are safe and policed responsibly, when our teachers and our nurses are truly vibrant members of the middle class, then I'll be able to stand up here and talk about the Apollo project for battery technology that we so desperately need to transition our economy to a carbon-free future. Those two things are interlinked in a way that we are not acknowledging nearly enough as a society today. Well, right here in New York City, we can change that. We have to. It's not going to be easy, but we sure as hell cannot afford to fail, and we're going to do it together. So thank you all so much for this opportunity today. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing your questions.